In trying to understand and appreciate the real Jesus presented to us in the New Testament, it is necessary that conventional pictures and descriptions emanating from the churches be discarded and the records allowed to speak for themselves. Jesus was not the mild, insipid, halo-shrouded individual usually depicted. That stained glass window Christ is a fiction of men's imaginations. He is not just a baby on his mother's lap, or a catchphrase or curse used by many today. The real Jesus Christ was a man with an intense zeal, whose words and deeds attracted and captivated, yet frightened and repelled all that would hear him. The Bible's summary of him is, "You love righteousness and hate wickedness. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your fellows." His love of righteousness was vividly demonstrated in his zeal for cleansing the temple, not from Gentile idol worship, such as had been introduced by the Greeks at the beginning of the Maccabean period, but from the Jewish merchandising of religion. His love of God was reflected in a love for man, to the total disregard of his own comfort. The deaf, the dumb, lame, blind, palsied, the fevered, the leprous and the mad, who adorned the streets and byways of the nation, who were walked past by the people, who had become hardened by familiarity with the sights and by concern for their own considerable needs. These rejected people experienced an exultant freedom if they were prepared to cast off pride, come to his light, and endeavor to trust him. Gentiles too, if the spark of faith within them could surmount the national barriers and accept his teaching that he was not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and that salvation is from the Jews, found in him a neighbor who helped them in their plight, the preaching and sensitive attention to the needs of the thousands that pressed upon him, often till late in the day, as well as the constant traveling and lack of normal home comforts, left him tired and exhausted, to the point where on one occasion he slept soundly in the back of a pitching boat with a storm raging all around. And they went and woke him, saying, "Save, Lord, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, O men of little faith?" Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even winds and sea obey him?" You can imagine this exhausted, tired and soundly sleeping Jesus being shaken awake. Being a little frustrated at being woken, he gave them a rebuke. "Why are you afraid, O men of little faith?" Echoing the frustration felt by Jesus in Matthew 17. And Jesus answered, "O faithless and perverse generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me." Then slowly getting up, stretching his aching muscles, and then rebuking the storm, I hope that he then lay back down and got the rest of the sleep he needed without being further interrupted. Adding to his burdens was the hardness of heart of the clergy who, for the most part, despised his Galilean origin, frowned on his lack of traditional rabbinic education, looked down on his associations with the common people, and envied his powerful words and amazing gifts. They tried continuously to precipitate his downfall with a legalistic interpretation of the Sabbath law that would proscribe his acts of healing on the weekly day of rest. But he unmasked these self-seeking hypocrites who, he pointed out, would let their neighbors continue in suffering while they themselves took pains to care for the needs of their cattle. And behold, there was a man with a withered hand. And they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" So that they might accuse him. He said to them, "What man of you, if he has one sheep, and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not lay hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And the man stretched it out, and it was restored, whole like the other. But the Pharisees went out and took counsel against him, how to destroy him. His words against such merciless, artificial formalism were as severe and harsh as his compassion for the needy was unstinting. Towards the end of his second year of preaching, in the spring of the year, Jesus' popularity with the multitudes appears to have reached its peak. News of John the Baptist's execution caused him to seek solitude away from the cities, but the multitude followed him. Matthew records, "And he came forth, and saw a great multitude, and he had compassion on them, and healed their sick. At evening time he restrained his disciples from sending them away, and instead fed the 5,000 men, plus unnumbered women and children, with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. As the wonder of the miracle dawned upon them, the people acknowledged his authority, and threatened to forcibly make him king. When the people saw the sign which he had done, they said, 'This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world.' Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force, to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Knowing that the time for the kingdom was not yet, Jesus withdrew himself. The next day on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, Jesus questioned the true motives of the inquiring crowd, who mobbed him, stating bluntly that their support had its basis in the satisfaction of their physical hunger. When they found him, on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you come here?" Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you seek me, not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him has God the Father set his seal." Then they said to him, "What must we do to be doing the works of God?" Jesus answered them, "This is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent." So they said to him, "Then what sign do you do, that we may see, and believe you? What work do you perform? Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Still, the people were asking for more physical bread from Jesus, to care and look after them in the here and now, to be king over their daily physical life, not their spiritual life, as Jesus was trying to convey to them. Just the day before they were participants in the miracles of the loaves and fishes, and now they were asking for a sign as to his claims. It may be that new people had come flocking, hearing that Jesus was creating food for everyone, as he was recorded as speaking in the synagogue at Capernaum, and wanted to be part of it. Jesus was indeed creating food, but of the spiritual sense. He answered them. Jesus then said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven. My Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven, and gives life to the world." They said to him, "Lord, give us this bread always." Again, Jesus replied from a standpoint of spirituality and life, but most of the listeners, as happens still today, only hear of the physical and carnal aspects of what he was saying. "I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread which comes down from heaven, that a man may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread, which came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever, and the bread which I shall give for the life of the world is my flesh." The Jews then disputed among themselves, saying, "How can this man give us his flesh to eat?" So Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man, and drink his blood, you have no life in you. He who eats my flesh, and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. For my flesh is food indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He who eats my flesh, and drinks my blood, abides in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live, because of the Father, so he who eats me will live because of me. This is the bread which came down from heaven, not such as the fathers ate and died. He who eats this bread will live forever." This he said in the synagogue, as he taught at Capernaum. These sayings were extremely hard for the Jews to hear, as the law clearly outlawed the drinking or eating of blood, as seen in Leviticus. "For the life of every creature is the blood of it. Therefore I have said to the people of Israel, you shall not eat the blood of any creature. For the life of every creature is its blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off." This caused deep offense to the listeners, who still could not see past the physical to the meaning of Jesus' words, which would have taken a step of childlike faith and trust in him to accomplish. The record continues. Many of his disciples when they heard it, said, "This is a hard saying. Who can listen to it?" But Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples murmured at it, said to them, "Do you take offense at this? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending where he was before? It is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh is of no avail. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. But there are some of you that do not believe." For Jesus knew from the first who those were that did not believe, and who it was that would betray him. And he said, "This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted him by the Father." After this, many of his disciples drew back and no longer went about with him. It would seem that almost all but the faithful 12 stopped following Jesus at this point, with Jesus even asking them if they would stay. Jesus said to the 12, "Do you also wish to go away?" Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God." Over the next year, his popularity was to further decline, and the antagonism of the Jewish leaders to increase, until his ascent to Jerusalem at the last Passover brought his work to a climax. It was not difficult for the various Jewish parties, normally a disagreement between one another, to unite in gradually regaining much of the ground they had lost, capitalizing on the doubts, bewilderment, and, eventually, the disenchantment of the multitude. They pointed to the fact that none of the Jewish leaders supported him, and, furthermore, that he came from despised Nazareth, and not from Bethlehem, the city of David, which the prophet Micah had designated as the birthplace of Messiah. If only they had inquired further, but maybe they had, and the Nazarene origin story was all too convenient. In due course, the Sanhedrin, the governing body of the Jews, issued a warrant for his arrest as a troublemaking impostor, but they found difficulty in apprehending him. He still had a measure of support, including that from his dedicated followers, and his moral power and purity overwhelmed his would-be captors. The officers then went back to the chief priests and Pharisees, who said to them, "Why did you not bring him?" The officers answered, "No man ever spoke like this man." Thank you for watching. Subscribe to get notifications of new videos. Like, share and comment below.